Good morning, everybody.
Hold on.
Thanks for joining.
So, hello, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you are joining from. My name is Rashid Oguniran, and this is the second session we shall be having today, and it's going to be on basic of T-SQL and SSIS. And so we have an amazing professional that we are bringing on board today. His name is Mr. Ayobami Adeleke. And this is, I'm going to read his brief bio. So, Mr. Ayobami is a seasoned data management professional and a BI developer with over 5 years industry experience. And as a data warehouse and BI developer using Microsoft Azure Data Services, Microsoft BI Stack, SQL Server Integration Service, SSIS, SQL, and SSAS. You equally have understanding of SQL server reporting, that is SSRS and Power BI, to design and build enterprise report and dashboard across banking, financial services industry to investment, retail and manufacturing industries. He is also a Microsoft certified data engineer. He is also a data analyst associate and a trainer with years of experience working with SQL Server and Power BI. Ladies and gentlemen, join me as we welcome Mr. Adeleke Ayobami for his session. Thank you. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Rashid. Am I audible?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone from all over the world. Thank you for joining this session. It's a great privilege to be here, to come on board to speak to you guys today on the basics of T-SQL and SSIS. Like Mr. Rashid rightly said, my name is Ayobami Adeleke. Just a minute. Okay. Yeah. So today on the essentials of data engineering track, I will be speaking briefly on the basics of T-SQL and SSIS. Like Mr. Rashid rightly said, I'm a Microsoft certified trainer, a Microsoft certified data engineer, also certified as a Power BI data analyst and a MCSA BI development. Currently, I work as a data manager with one of the leading FMCGs in Nigeria. I have experience as a data engineer and a DWBI developer, a trainer, a consultant, and speaker. I want to use this quick moment to show a gratitude and appreciation to our partners that have brought up and made this event possible. Special thanks to Microsoft, special thanks to Jira Computer Solutions, and Enterprise DNA. I count this as a great privilege. So my agenda for today is quite brief. I know we have a number of things to cover in the space of an hour. But looking at the topic, basics of SSIS and T-SQL. So on the T-SQL side, I'll quickly introduce us to what is T-SQL, that's Transact SQL. I'll discuss around relational databases, schemas and object names, SQL statement types, the select statement. I'll do a quick illustration of how the select statement works. I'll talk about how do you work with data types in Transact SQL, how do you deal with null values in your database, your data tables, and the likes. Then, with respect to SSIS, I'll just give us a quick introduction to what is SSIS. I'll show us the development environment, what it looks like, what is achievable, and the two major functions on SSIS interface, which are the control flows and the data flow. Okay, just to set the expectations right. So the target audience for this session are aspiring
Okay.
database professionals, be it data engineers, data analysts, data scientists, or even database administrators. Basically, anybody that's going to have to do with a database, that will have to query a database, write queries against a database to fetch data, to insert data, or to just analyze data. They too use
Hello.
relational databases to store their information. And finally, for people that are preparing for SQL Server certification examinations, this session is going to actually shed more light into key areas that you need to focus your attention on. Also, there's a Microsoft study material. There's a course online that Microsoft offers, a 2-day course actually. that gives you um, foundational and in-depth knowledge to querying data with Microsoft Transact SQL. So you can just check up the course code online. DP080T00 is the course code. Next slide. So yeah, let's get started. So what is Transact SQL? Before I go into Transact SQL, it's always good to start from the basics. So we have what is called is SQL, the structured query language, relational database. SQL was developed by IBM as early way back as 1970s. It became adopted as a standard by ANSI and the International as a language to query out the relational database. Bringing it now to the Microsoft of have PLSQL for Oracle. For Microsoft environments, you'll be talking about Transact SQL. Short of it is the T-SQL. The query language that is used within SQL Server databases, be it on premises, local instances on physical servers or cloud servers, Azure SQL database on the cloud environment, or even on the Azure Synapse Analytics environment on Azure Data Services. There's something interesting about T-SQL or SQL. SQL is actually a declarative language, not like the regular other programming languages like Python or Java, which are procedural. So when you say declarative, it means that you actually tell the system what you want to see. You don't necessarily have to tell it how to do it or the steps to follow to achieve that result. So I can just say, okay, give me um, all products from the product table as is above 20 naira, and the system gives me the data that speaks to what I have requested. I don't necessarily have to tell the engine how it achieves that, how it filters data from the entire list of records in the table. Declarative SQL is exactly what you need. It gives you the results. Next slide. Okay, so here I have an illustration with respect to relational databases. Relational databases are usually a build of entities, which are usually tables, which are related. So when you look into environment or system, RDBMS, you see a list of tables. These tables are called relations. They are all related based on primary and foreign key relationships that exist between the design of the database. So relations are stored in tables, and these tables have attributes, which are the columns of those tables. So looking at the screen, we have a number of entities here. We have the customer entity, we have the sales order detail entity, we have the sales order header, and the product. So these are four entities, but you can see they have relationships. So I can see a relationship from my customer to my sales order header, which tells me what a customer is as which order a customer has actually raised on the system or on the ERP or whatever application generates this data. And I can also see a sales order details table, which points to my product table. So we can with this I can do a relationship based on the product ID to see how many of our orders are actually speaking to what kind of product that we have set up in a relational database based on primary keys and foreign keys. On the product table now, my primary key is my product ID, but on my sales order details table, I have the product ID as a foreign key, which is referencing the product table still in the relational database. Okay, so looking at schemas and object names. Schemas are usually namespaces for database objects. So when you create a database, you have what you call schemas. Schemas are such that you use them to arrange your data, organize your data such that entities that speak to the same um, um, group are categorized in one schema. So I can have a sales schema, I can have an order schema, I can have a master schema, and the default schema that comes with SQL databases is your DBO schema. So if you don't create a user schema, all of your objects, all of your tables, they will all be created into the DBO schema. There's something you need to also know is the fully qualified names. So for every object you create on a database or a relational database system, usually has a fully qualified name with this nomenclature, which starts with the server name, dot the database where that object is created, then the schema name, followed by the object name itself. So best practice is when you are working within a database context, always ensure you include a schema name for your objects. Don't just reference or call the object names directly. So here now we can see on the screen we have a product database, a production database, and a sales database. Within these databases, we have two tables. In the sales database, we have the orders table. We also have the customer table. And in the production database, we have the product table and the orders table. Now, looking at SQL statement types, we have three categories basically. The data definition languages, those are the DDLs, which are used to actually create objects. They are used for defining database objects on the RDBMS system. So there are three of them. There's the create keyword, there's the alter keyword, and the drop keyword. So the create keyword basically is to create an object. You want to create a table, you want to create a stored procedure, you want to create a view or a function. So once you are done creating, you want to go back to tweak the query or make a change to it, you use the alter command. So you say alter object name, and you can then modify the content of what you have used to create that object. And if you are done working with that object, you don't need it anymore on your database. You can use the drop command to drop it. So drop the object name, and that object is deleted from the database. Now, when you done defining the object, you want to manipulate data, usually in your table, or maybe you want to update records in your table. You think about using the data manipulation language, which is DML. So here you are just using these commands to query and modify data. The major keywords here are your select statements, your insert. You want to insert records into a table. You want to update records in a table. So I have a table. I want to change a value in a column. I use an update command. If I want to delete a row or number of rows based on maybe if a particular value or maybe a where condition, I use the delete statement. So using the delete would actually delete records from the table and not drop the object, not the table. But if I'm interested in dropping my table, I use the DDL command drop and put the table name. Then the last part of the commands are the control languages. So you've created objects, you've inserted your data, you have prepared your data ready. But how do you now grant permissions in terms of security to your data? You don't just want your data to be accessible by just anybody. So you could grant select permissions to particular objects to particular persons using roles or using schemas, depending on how you want and the level of access you want to give to the user or the user names in particular. So if also you have the revoke. So probably you're giving somebody access to something, and the IT team is coming back to say, okay, this particular user, we don't want him to have access to this table anymore. You could just use the revoke command to um, withdraw that access or that permission that the person has to that object. And you can also give the person a denied permission on an object, such that you are denying him access to that object. When he tries to query something, it won't return the results. Yeah, so looking at the select statement properly now, on the screen here, we have a statement that is saying select the order date, the count of the order ID from my sales orders table, where the status of the order is shipped. And also, I want to do a group by on the order date, and I'm also filtering saying where the count of the order ID is greater than one. Then eventually, I want to order by my order ID, order dates in descending order. So how do I understand what this query is doing? So usually, I mentioned earlier that SQL is a declarative statement. So the first thing it does is when you write this kind of query, when it's trying to execute, it goes first to the from keyword and looks at, okay, what table am I actually getting this data from? So here it can see that, okay, it's going to the sales order table. So it goes to that table, catches the information in that table into memory. Then it looks at the next thing, which is the where condition. The where condition says status is shipped. So if it goes to the status column and looks at the order date, it will see that okay, the order is shipped. So it will now execute the query.
Hello, Mr. Ayobami. Can you hear me? Hello, Mr. Ayobami. Hello, we are not hearing you, sir. Okay.
Oh, you can't hear me?
Yeah, yeah. We lost you for like 30 seconds. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I can
Hello,
hear
Mr.
you.
Ayobami. Okay,
I
so
can
you
hear
can
you.
go back in. You can go back a little for like 30 seconds, please.
Voice. Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you now. I said you can go
Uh,
back a little for like 30 seconds.
oh, okay. So I was just explaining it goes through your from keyword, goes to the table you are trying to query.
Your network is. Hello, hello, Mr. Ayobami. Hello, can you hear me, sir? I strongly apologize. I can get feedbacks that we cannot hear anything. I strongly apologize. I want to believe that our presenter is having network issue. So please, guys, stay tuned. Let me reach out to him. It apparently is having a network issue. You can see that he's no longer online. Just a second. So far, pending when our presenter will come back on board, what can we say we have learned so far? What can we pick? I can see Anna, I can see Chioma, I can see Tomisin. So I want us to type in the chat box. What is our take home with respect to data engineering so far? What is our take home? What can we tell us? Maybe in one word or two words. Okay, I can see Promise Aquawo said a lot to say. All great. Thank you, Mr. Promise, which means you are really up to speed. You are with us. Another person select statement. Okay, I can see someone also mentioning about select statement. So when you see select statement, SQL, what comes to your mind is data engineering. Thank you so much. Thank you for that feedback. Any other person? Any other person? Okay, so it's like okay, so our facilitator is back online. Thank you for all those feedback. Select statement, a lot to say. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. So, Mr. Obami, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So, we lost you for about 2 minutes now. So you can just do a recap
Yeah,
and move on. We can
I can't see
understand.
the slide anymore.
Okay, I thought you are sharing it from your end. You need
Okay,
to
let
you
me
need to
share
share.
it.
You know when you were disconnected, so the thing went off.
Okay, let me do that
Okay,
again.
okay, okay. I can see it now.
Yeah.
So just do a general recap and move on from there.
Okay.
Just like two
Yes.
minutes
All
backward.
right.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so I was just trying. Apologies for that. Thank you so much, Mr. Rashid. So I was trying to explain how the select statement works. So basically, it starts from the keyword from the table name, then the filters, the conditions, the aggregations that you have applied before the virtual select keyword then applies. So eventually, after all of these filters have been done, you've selected the ship statuses, orders, you've done your group by, and you have the filter of those ones where the order number is appearing more than once. Then you then do a select. The select now shows you the order date and the count of that order ID. How many times do you have that order ID appearing? Then eventually, because we now have an order by command here, usually order by is the last, is the last command that runs when you do a select statement with an order by in it. If you don't have the order by, the select is always the last. But once there's an order by, that order by is always executed finally after your select, because it helps you to now do, maybe you want to sort in ascending or a descending order. So let me move on to the next slide. So this is just basic select query examples. So when you want to do select all, you want to see all columns from a table, you can always use the select star from the database name and the table name. But usually this is not always good for performance because you might be pulling more than what you need. So it's advisable you always pick specific columns. So you just do a select, you provide the column names you need from the table name, and that is fine. So here you know that you're only picking the data you actually need and not the pool of fields. Because when you do a select star, you are selecting columns that might not even be useful in your analytics or in your reporting. So why bring them in the first place? So another approach is to do an expression and to create aliases. So looking at what we have here, we have the select name as product. So originally the name of the column is name, but now we want to call it product. So when you do select name as product, you will see the values in the name column, but the name of that column will now appear as product. You've given that name column an alias, which is product. Also, this is an expression here that is doing a calculation, multiplying my list price by zero point 0.9. And now I give that value, that computation and alias as my sales price. Moving on. So working with data types in SQL Server, these are a few out of the available data types: numeric, approximate numeric, exact numeric, characters, date and time, binary, and some other data types. So depending on the kind of data you want to pass into that column, that determines the kind of data type you assign to that column when you're creating that column or creating that table or that column as an object. So moving on, working with nulls. So one thing that will always happen when you work with SQL databases is you always come across null values. Nulls usually represent a missing or an unknown value. So maybe the user didn't populate, it didn't provide a value in that column, and that place is blank. So you will see it appear as null. Or sometimes you might just see a blank white card or white space, depending on how the data comes. So I just want to quickly talk about the ANSI behavior for null values. So usually when you do an aggregation or you try to sum up a null value with another value, it always evaluates to a null. So what I'm saying now is if you do a select from a particular column and you try to add null to it, it will give you null. At the same time, if you have a value, say 2 plus null, it will evaluate to null because that null takes precedence over the value in that column or whatever column you're trying to add up. Now, looking at equality comparisons, this also always returns nulls, false for null values. So when you say null equals to null, you are trying to do a validation. Is null equals to null? It will tell you false because null does not mean anything. So it can't agree. It can't necessarily compare it with another null. It makes no sense. So it will tell you false. Um, if you also say null is null, it's trying to check is null actually null. This will return true because it's looking at nothing against nothing. Yeah, it's true. So it tells you that null is null. So how do you handle nulls? So thankfully within SQL Server, there are functions that have been provided off the box that allows you to treat null. So when you have a null value, if you don't want that null values to remain null, you could use any of these three functions. Either you use the is null value function, or the null if function, or the qualis function. So how they work is this: is null usually it takes two parameters. You provide the the first one is a column that has the null value and the value you want to use to replace that null value. So I can say is null maybe product price, comma, 2 or 0, 0. So if I do that, in my table, it will check any column that has a null value in the price. Instead of putting it as null, it will replace it with 0 or whatever um, amount I put in the value part of the function. Same in the same vein, null if. So if you have a null, you can use the null if function such that you put the value, the column or the variable, and the value you want it to replace it with. They work similar, same approach. And also for the qualis, so qualis is saying that if this column is blank, use this other column. So you have two columns, you are trying to use them to fill one particular column eventually. So if column one is blank, you should fill it with column two. Else, maybe column three or as much as possible. So it takes a number of variables or columns. Now let's move to SSIS. So what is SSIS? SSIS is just one of the building blocks of SQL Server. So SQL Server evolved from database management alone to business intelligence development studio, that is BIT, Then on and on, it moved to becoming the SQL Server data tools. So one of the components of SQL Server data tools is SSIS. We also have SSIS for analysis services and the SSRS for reporting services. But focus here is SSIS. What is SSIS? So SSIS is integration services. It's Microsoft's ETL execution platform. It usually has about three major components: the control flow engine, the data flow engine, and also the unit of execution is always a package. So whatever you do on SSIS, it revolves of the least edible or obtainable result or solution you have there is a package. So in a package, you could in a solution you could have multiple projects, you could have multiple packages, but the minimum atom unit of execution is a package. So we have the ETL development environment, which I will show us shortly. It works with Visual Studio environments. It's very similar to the Visual Studio interface. And within SSIS, we have wizards. We have the import export wizard. So you can just use that to import and export data from different sources. You could use the package migration wizard. You could also use the package configuration wizard to configure your packages and deploy them. And you also have the package deployment wizard. At the same time, we have the command line executables, DTSX, the DTSX user interface, and the DTU utilization wizard. So this is a tour of what the dev environment looks like. We have quite a number of things. In the middle here, we have the canvas where you have your control flow, your data flow. You can set up parameters, event handlers, and the package explorer. On the far right, you have the solution explorer, which shows you what your solution looks like, the connection managers you have in the solution, the packages you have in the solutions, the projects you have in the solution. Then on the far left, we have the SSIS toolbox. So if you are working with SSIS, the SSIS toolbox is always your go-to place. It holds a number of tags, a number of commands, containers, a number of transformations, depending on which part of the canvas you are. So when you click on the control flow, what you see is quite different from what you see when you're in the data flow. So moving on, I'll just walk us through some of the tags. So we have the data flow tags, which is like the major component of SSIS. Without the data flow tags, you have not done anything within SSIS. So the idea behind SSIS is you want to extract data from a particular data source, do some transformations, and load it into another environment. So that's the idea behind ETL: extract, transform, and load. So looking at the screen, we have the common transformations that you could actually apply, or the common tags rather. Now I'm on the control flow here, so I have the tags on my far left. So I have the analysis services process tags. I have my data profiling tags. So all of these tags are used for different things. So if I have a analysis services model I want to process from within SSIS, I don't want to necessarily go do a SQL agent job to refresh it. I can just create a task here within my package that would always connect to that model, refresh it based on once I execute the package within SSIS. At the same time, looking at execute package tasks, I have a number of options. I have multiple packages in my solution here right now. I could decide to now call another package from one package. So I have a package for that extracts from A to B. I have another package that does some transformations. I can call the second package from the first package using the execute package tags. At the same time, I can also do the execute process tags. So depending on what I want to achieve, that determines which of these tags you would actually go for. So this wizard is or this environment is very interesting, and it's something that the more you use it, you get more familiar with it, and you enjoy working with the environment. So going to the containers. So for some iterative processes such that you want to loop through, give me a scenario, I want to loop through a folder, I want to loop through a remote directory somewhere on another server. I could decide to use a for loop container or a for each loop container depending on my situation. So basically what this just evolves to is it's similar to your for loop in your regular procedural programming, whereby once the condition is met, something happens until that condition is not met before it terminates. So I could just say I want to look through a folder and pick all of the Excel package files in that folder. I want to look through them, pick the content, then dump it into a SQL table in a database environment. But one thing to note about this is the content of those files you are trying to look through in the container or in the folder have to be the same. So it's a bit rigid. You have to ensure that the structure of your data aligns. When I say structure, I'm talking about column names, data type of the columns, all of these things must be the same. So in a scenario whereby you have a monthly report or a periodic report that you run from January to the end of the year by December, and you want to look through this data, you need to ensure that there's consistency in the file formats, the column names, the um, data formatting in the files, such that when the SSIS package goes into that folder and it pulls data from the first one, that same metadata is still applicable for the one for February, for March, because once it sees a difference or a change in that structure, the package is going to break. Except, of course, if you have built a mechanism such that when it identifies a defect or a change in the structure, it flags it and maybe loops it into another archive and bypasses that particular file and moves on to the next file. So it's the opportunities here are actually endless. What you can achieve with SSIS is more of how vast you are with the tool. It's very flexible, it's very dynamic. The more you use the tool, the better you get at it, and the more you're able to achieve more from the tool. So some other tasks here, we have the analysis that the backup database task. So as a DBA, you have a routine process of maybe running backups every night or maybe every weekend. You don't want to manually do this, having to go to each of the databases to go and execute the extract command. A good way to do this is set this up within SSIS. Just use the um, database backup tags within SSIS. Set it up to connect to all of your servers within your environment, which you want to actually back up your databases, and provide it where it's going to dump the data, the backup files, and all of that. Then you deploy this package, schedule it as a job that runs depending on your need. That way, you don't have to do anything. The system automatically, once it's the scheduled time and date, it executes, does the backup, and you're fine. So other things to take into notice, you also have the execute T-SQL command. So here, another interesting thing about T-SQL and SSIS is they complement each other. So queries you have written on or stored procedures you have created in your database that you have within the database, you can actually call them up and execute them here from within SSIS. You just need to make reference of to use the execute SQL statement or use the execute SQL tags, whichever one is applicable. So once you do this, you have to you create a connection manager to the database that holds that data. The next thing you do is set it up, provide the object name you want to reference, maybe execute the stored procedure, provide the stored procedure name. Or maybe if you want to do an update to something in the database, you can do all of that using the execute SQL tags within SSIS. So SSIS, sometimes there has been discussions around is it best to always use T-SQL or is it best to work with SSIS? So this is actually a function of so many things. There are so many things involved to this, right? Maybe you want to consider your infrastructure capacity, what's the capacity in terms of memory, in terms of storage, in terms of CPU processing speed. All of these things actually would decipher or help you to actually decide on the best route to go. But usually SSIS packages are more optimized, they run faster, because they are using more of your system memory, the resources of your system. But when you do execute T-SQL queries against the database engine, this actually runs against your database. And performance wise, it might depend on so many things. Network latency is another factor. So there are so many things actually involved that you need to put into consideration. So let me move on to the next slide. Yeah, so looking at the control flow elements, this is just a typical anatomy of what an SSIS package looks like. So on the control flow, you could have a number of tasks. So the first task could be an FTP task. Maybe you're pulling data from an FTP server, a remote server somewhere. You can also link that to a scripting task. A scripting task is maybe something that has to do with a .NET command or query. Then eventually you can link that once that task completes, then it now does a data flow task, which is actually where you do your extract, your transform and load. And usually once you create a data flow task, that takes you to the data flow of the SSIS interface. So it moves from the control flow into the data flow. That's why you have it as another layer, So inside the data flow task is where you now have your extract, your transform, and your load processes. So extract is majorly your source where you're pulling the data from. Transformation is okay, what do you want to do to this data that you have extracted from XYZ? And where are you eventually loading the transform data into? And eventually you want to also have another SMT tags that probably updates the information on the SMTP server that okay, something has happened, or a mail has been sent out that an update has happened on this particular data object. So for control flow elements, we have a number of things. Usually, the first key one is the tags, like I mentioned earlier. Um, I've talked about all of these tags, execute SQL, file system tags. So file system tags is one of the tags that allows you to actually move data from local directories into from one server or one environment into another server directory or environment. So if I want to push data from a local folder from my system here to a remote server, I can use SSIS to achieve that, provided I'm able to establish a connection from my system to that server, probably using a VPN or maybe using a remote connection. Another thing to look into is send mail tags. So if you have an SMTP configuration server on your server, that way you are able to send out emails from SQL Server using the SSIS send mail tags. So you just need to set up the mail server, the to and from email addresses, the content of the email, and you schedule it. So another interesting thing is the script tags. So I mentioned this earlier. You are able to then write custom C# queries or .NET queries depending on your proficiency, and eventually the data flow tags, which is actually the star of the opera, is the major thing in SSIS. Without For every package you build in SSIS, there is always at least one data flow tax. Without the data flow tax, you have really not done anything with that package, because the idea behind an ETL or SSIS package is you want to do extract, transform, and load, and you can only achieve this using a data flow tax, right? So other things to also consider are the containers. So you can wrap your tags, your data flow tags, your SQL, all of any of these tags actually into a container, and that container then allows you to loop through different based on different conditions, based on so many other things. Maybe you want to aggregate data, loop through a folder, and insert it into a destination. All of these things you can achieve using a container. Then the last bit of it is, if you look at the anatomy on the screen, you have the green arrows that indicates that when the FTP task completes. So the green color in the signifies a process of success, and for those that failed, you have a red arrow or a red connection. So those are what we call precedence constraints. So these are set up within the package such that when a task or an operation fails, what happens next? When the FTP task is successful, that is only when my scripting task will run. But if I also do another condition or a precedence constraint from the FTP saying when it fails, this other condition should happen. That way, the package will not break, the flow will still execute. Although the task has failed, but the package will not break. It will still continue to the other tasks and execute the other tasks till all of the tasks have been are executed. So looking at data flow basics, data flow is actually the key thing in exercise, like I mentioned. So there are various
Hello, Mr. Ayobami, we can't hear you.
the kind of data you're trying to load in and the type of data you're dealing with. But most typically, the ETL2 used in the exercise is always the data flow tags. This defines a data pipeline, DFT, and a basic data pipeline or data flow tags usually contains at least one source and one or more transformation. Optional, you could just do a select from and an insert into. So that is, you're just extracting and loading transformations. But when you want to do transformations, could have, in fact, it's not limited to anything. You could have as much as required transformations between your source and your destination. You could decide to split the data. You could try to do some metadata checks. You could do some row counts. You could also try to just do some aggregations, do some conditional transformations to it, or maybe rename some columns, take out some columns, shape the data properly the way it's
Can
actually
you
needed
just
for your.
okay, Mr.
Sorry.
Avami, we lost you for a while.
Oh, okay. So
We lost you for a while.
what part did you hear me last? Sorry.
Just go back for like a minute. Just do a recap of what you've been saying for the past 1 minute.
Okay. So I was trying to just give us an insight into what the data flow task is. It usually defines a pipeline, a data pipeline, and the constituent or component of the DFT is usually at least, which is where you're pulling your data from. Also, you have at least one destination. You could have multiple sources, you could have multiple destinations, which you then decide to then condense or consolidate into one source or multiple sources as well. At the same time, transformations are optional. When I say optional, you could have just a source and destination. You could have multiple sources, multiple destinations, depending on the scenario, depending on what you're trying to achieve. Optional is transformation. So let me move on to the next slide. Okay, so data flow sources and destinations. So we've been talking about data flow sources and destinations. They are interchangeable. So your source is also equivalent of your destination, depending on what you're trying to achieve. So you could have a database engine as a source and also as a destination. Different types of database engines exist. It could be the OLADB source, it could be an Ado.NET source, it could be an ODBC source. When you're talking of flat files, you could talk about maybe an Excel flat file, a CSV file, maybe a raw file, even XML files, and even JSON files. And you can actually extract from a JSON file into a database using SQL Server Integration Services. I don't know if we'll have some time for demo.
Okay, so we still have like you still have like 4 minutes. This is 4:46 by my time. I don't know. Let me ask our viewers. Is there any question? If you know you have any question, please send it to the chat box so that our facilitator can put it to consideration. But if there is as we speak, there is no question. So what that means is that you still have about 9 minutes. So if there is any demo you want to, you can do whatever you can do within that 9 minutes. I think it's fine.
Okay. It's confirmed you can see my screen.
It's not okay. It's about to come up, but not yet. Okay, so I've had it to stream now. I can see your screen now.
Okay. All right. So let me just go back, connect.
Is
So
there is there is there a way you can make it a bit bigger for our viewers to see?
okay. Is it better?
Yeah, to an extent. Yeah. I think it's better now.
All
Can go on.
right. Okay. So, like I was saying, I was using the AdventureWorks database to explain some of the entities. So let me just take a step back. So this is my SSMS interface, which I'm using to connect to my local instance of SQL Server. So I have my instance name here. This is server name. So I'm doing a connection using my Windows authentication. So I've connected, and within the server, I have a number of databases. I have about 3 databases at the moment. My focus here is on the AdventureWorks database. So within AdventureWorks database, we can see all of the entities. So the entities are represented by tables. So speaking to what we discussed earlier, I will just go to the sales order table. So I'll do a select from this. I just want to see the top 1000 records on this table. So here I have my data. But if you look at this query we had earlier, I was saying that it starts from the where condition from the table name, which is my sales order header. Then I apply my where condition, the shipped. So let me just see how I can just do some quick filter. So I will just do a select statement from this table, and I'll do a where condition saying where my status. Status is a keyword, so I need to put it in brackets. It's equals to, okay, so I have 5. I really don't know what 5 means, but let me just assume I'm picking 5 and execute. So this we have reduced. Okay, I think what I need to do here is take out the top 1000. So ideally, without filtering on the table, what I have is a total of still running 31,465 rows. So I have 31,465 orders in this table. But I'm only interested in those that their status is 5. I'm assuming 5 are those that have been shipped. So I'm using a where condition where my status is 5 to filter this down. So it helps me to reduce the data. Oh, okay, so they are all 5. So this field is not a good field for me to use. Let me use territory ID equals to 5. So I just want to see territory ID that is 5. So you can see out of the 31,000 orders we have, just 486 of them are for territory ID 5. So this has helped the system to limit the data. So if I then now say I want to aggregate, maybe I want to do a count of how many sales orders exist for a particular day, I then need to do a group by. Let me see. And I'll just have to do a group by order dates. Then now I've introduced a group by, I need to do an aggregation. So I will do something here, copy this. If you remember during the presentation, I mentioned that the execution starts from my from keyword. So now I want to do select the order number, sales order number, which is the sales order number, and do a count of my sales order number. It's not picking it. Sorry, I needed to do this as order dates since I'm grouping by my order dates. Execute this. So with this now, I'm able to see per day, per order dates, how many orders were raised. So it's telling me now that I have orders in 51 days based on this result. I have 51 rows as my result. That means orders came in for only 51 days. Now, if I want to uh, do a sort, I want to order by, okay, so I didn't give my column a name. So now let me give it an alias and call this as count of orders. If I run this again, and my column will have a name. So I can see count of orders as the column name. So it's telling me that per this day, for each of this day, this is the number of orders that was raised. So if I want to sort this column, maybe in ascending or descending order, all I just need to do is order by my order dates. I want to sort the order dates ascending. So the most recent orders come. Then if I do it the other way around, I want to see the most recent one first. I will just do descending. This will sort it in the other way around.
Hello, Mr. Ayobami. You have just 2 minutes more.
Okay, so I'm almost done actually. So this just gives us an insight of how the select statement works. So we've been able to filter for the other territory IDs that are five. We've done an aggregate based on the other dates, and we did a count to know how many orders were raised for each date. And we've eventually did an order by to sort the number of to sort the other dates either in ascending or descending order. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you so much.
Wow, 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 wow. This is very amazing. I want to appreciate our amazing facilitator. I have had an experience doing a training on MSBI before, but the dimension you took in taking this class is extremely different, and I really appreciate your time. So, for all our viewers, is there any question? If you know you have any question, then the people at the back room, can you please send our feedback link for our viewers to fill, please, because we have just 3 or 4 minutes. So as we speak, I don't have any question on the chat box. But if you know you get value, but before I go to that, I want to ask a question. Mr. Ayobami,
Yes,
this
sir.
your session is very amazing, and for me, in fact, I still have to watch this video again to still go and make some research. But what I want to ask you is that for um, this training you just gave to us, this class, for
Yes, sir.
instance, is there any certification that someone can use to authenticate the knowledge that you have learned based on what you've taught us now? I know you mentioned a training, a 2 days
Yes.
training. I didn't get it very well. I tried to write it down. I think you said DP080. I don't get it very well, Sha. So what I'm asking is there
Yeah.
any certification that you can advise us or and every other person watching that okay, if you have learned SQL on your own, you know there are a lot of platforms that you can learn SQL like A3 School and the rest like that that can use to validate
Ah,
the knowledge that you have acquired to be sure. Like now, if I learn Power BI now and I go and do what's it called now, a Power BI data analyst, commonly known as that 100. If I do that
yeah.
now, Microsoft will give me make me a what's it called now, MCDA, that's Microsoft Certified Data Analyst. So I want to ask, in SQL journey, what do you recommend?
Okay, so to answer that question, technology evolves. Before now, there used to be an exam on querying SQL, Transact SQL, with querying databases with Transact SQL. But now technology has evolved. Microsoft is not going the route of technologies again. Now they now go the route of job roles and the skill sets you need for that role. So now there are certifications for a data engineer, there are certifications for a data analyst, there's a certification for a data scientist, and all of these people use SQL. So
Okay.
there's no direct exam for SQL on its own anymore. It used to be in the past, but it has been retired. So now the technology, the way approach
Okay.
Microsoft is coming
Okay.
now is you need to specify on a career path. Maybe you want to become a data engineer, you want to become a data analyst, and all of these things, all of these roles actually still work with SQL. So with any of those certification, the
So
associate exams and all of those professions, you can actually test your skills on SQL.
So what you are saying now is that whether I want to be a data analyst, I want to be a data scientist or a DBA, I just have to get my hands dirty on SQL.
Yes, if you're
But
a data
but my
professional, you can't avoid it. Yeah.
but my concern is that are you saying the SQL, SQL, the more you go in, the deeper it goes. Now, are you
Yes.
saying this is the same level of degree of SQL that all those three job roles we have? I want to be more clearer. That, okay, if I want to be a data scientist, now you saying is the same knowledge of SQL that somebody who is a data analyst must have with someone who is trying to be a data scientist?
So it's not the same, but the
Okay,
concepts of SQL for all the roles are the same.
okay, okay,
Yeah. So it's the
okay, okay,
concepts
okay,
that matters. Yeah.
okay, okay, okay. So thank you so much. We really appreciate you, and we'll still like to have you again because for me, this is a very great class, and I really appreciate your presentation. You are so fast. I mean, for you to have been able to cover what you covered, I mean, I dove my cap for you, sir.
Yeah, Rashid.
So thank you
A
so much. God
privilege.
bless
It's a
you.
privilege.
And would like to see you to still host you. So that is how we have come to the end of today's session. And I want to thank everybody that is on this call for attending this session. The journey is just starting, that I said in our former session. It's just starting. This is just week 3. And so we will the next there is going to be week 4. Though I don't have the information here, but just check our platform, Niger Data Platform 22. Just check it out. We are on LinkedIn, we are on Twitter, we just check us out. We are on YouTube. Just follow us so that you can get an update as to all the classes that we'll be having. So it is 5 p.m. already. So that is how we have come to the end of today's session. See you same time next week. By next week,
Thank you, everybody.
by next week 2:45, because we're going to have some visitors that are going to give a kind of introductory session. Some of our partners. So you can give us both of thanks while we close, Mr. Ayobami.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Rashid. I also want to just say a quick thank you to the community for giving me this opportunity to come to speak. I see it a great privilege and I'm highly honored and I appreciate you all. Thanks for joining. I look forward to having another session with you, maybe sometimes in the coming weeks. Have a nice holidays ahead. Thank you so much for your time. Bye, everyone.
So bye everyone. I'm expecting my salary meet from everyone. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Bye.